So thank you all so much for joining us today. Really excited to have this conversation with all of you. First of all, it'd be great if we could go around and you could briefly introduce yourself and your product. And as you're going through this, I'd love it if you could answer, what was the challenge or the problem that you were trying to solve kind of when you were starting to develop this product or when you were kind of working on this product in your current role? We're going to go around my screen. Chris, can we start with you?
Yes, of course. Hi, I'm play designer at Tokaboka in Stockholm in Sweden. And as a play designer, I design the content and the player experience. I do kids testing and bring the kids' perspectives into the production. And especially I do this in the Tokaboka World app. Tokaboka World is this single player, like offline, open-ended play experience for kids that are 6 to 12 years old. You can create your own characters, you can design your home, other locations in the world. There's lots of content in there. And the thing that we wanted to achieve when we created Tokaboka World, and also without all the other Tokaboka apps, I would say, was to create open-ended, child-led play. So experience that are not like traditional gaming. So all about creativity and imagination and self-expression.
My name is Dr. Anish Barai. I'm a lecturer in education and children's culture at the University of Sheffield. Currently, I'm working on looking at representations of diverse childhoods in children's animation video games. So I'm interested in the whole range of diversities of childhood: racial diversity, gender diversity, sexuality, neurodiversity, class diversity, all of these, and how they interconnect in various ways. For today's panel, I'll mainly talk about work I did with a company called Cooperative Innovations on a game called Storyland that they were building. We started work on this game during lockdown by sending some virtual reality headsets to local children and looking to their responses to virtual reality gaming, seeing what they found interesting in order to build up a game that would meet their interests.
So I'm Sally. My background is as a writer, journalist, and editor. I'm also now the co-founder of Yarn. So Yarn is an interactive storytelling platform for children aged 4+. And we got working on it back in 2022, before ChatGPT was a thing. My co-founder and I saw the potential of using generative AI to recreate an experience that we saw our daughter and children around us love to do, which was telling stories with their parents. And so we've set out to create an experience that facilitates and scaffolds children telling their own stories in an open-ended way. So in a natural conversation with Yarn's AI, children see their stories brought to life as an illustrated audio narrative. We thought there was this real opportunity to create a space where children could express themselves and be given the tools to give life to their imagination, as well as enhancing their language. But somewhat like Chris said, I mean, we didn't set out to be an education app. We were really motivated by the idea that children are born to be intrinsic learners, and so they don't necessarily need gamification in order to experience the gratifications of creative self-expression. And so we just wanted to create a space where children could experience that.
I'm Sajda. I'm from Little Hippa. We are a publishing house that we've been building for about 10 years. We focus on writing stories with the Muslim community, working with parents who want to write a story about ethics, morals, values. One part of Little Hippa is that we really focus on personalization. So we've been building that into stories.
So in different ways, all of these products that you're talking about, they involve tailoring or personalizing the experience to children in some way or another. What value do you think personalization gives children?
There's a theory of children's literature more broadly called windows, mirrors, and sliding doors. A story can be a window that you look into somebody else's life. It can be a mirror that reflects back your life, or it can be a sliding door, an entry point into a different kind of life. I would say that personalization is particularly about finding mirrors in stories that we see in here or that we create. A chance to see ourselves as the hero or heroine of a story, a chance to imagine ourselves doing something amazing. And that's so important for young people to build up their esteem, their confidence, their belief in their own self-worth, that they can be the main character.
My daughter had dyslexia, and I found that personalization and learning worked well together. She really struggled to read stories to the end or focus, but as soon as she started seeing her name or her picture, she wanted to focus and finish the story herself. I found it really hard for her to look at books that she found similarities in. So just everyday things in the house, you know, her brother's skin tone, the grandma's headscarf, it gave her that connection to their story. So she really felt, this story is about me. I'm learning about something that's to do with me. It was a really good outcome, the outcome that we wanted, really.
I totally agree with what has been said. I think that the more you have personalized something, the more valuable it gets to you, because it creates this feeling of ownership. Like, I've made this mine, I put my mark on it, I'm invested in it. I think this is really important, especially in our age group where you are exploring your identity, and a game or an app can hopefully be this safe environment for trying it out. We are designing for 3 different player types. So we talk about the creator and the storyteller and the explorer. And especially for the creator and the storyteller, this tailoring is super important, but with a different purpose, you could say, for them. For the creator, it's about being able to design something that is totally unique and personal and has a special style or aesthetic that represents who you are and what you like. And for the storyteller, it's more about making up your own story exactly the way you want and having all the right props and environments for creating that.
I think the way we think about personalization is that it's a way of giving children autonomy. I think there's a tendency to perceive children as these kind of empty vessels that need to be filled with optimal content. And a lot of the time, I think that's a reflection of how we as adults perceive the world as a scary, competitive place that we need to prepare our children to enter. But the way we've approached Yarn is to say, actually, children have their own ideas about the world. So we conceive Yarn as a kind of sandpit where children are actually given the space to say what they want to see and explore their interests, instead of having a kind of adult frame or adult-led experience imposed upon them.
When you give young people the ability to tell their own stories, what kinds of stories do they tend to tell?
In our case, it's definitely the everyday life stories. It's partly, I guess, because it's the context that we provide them with, but they go all in this in a very detailed way. Like waking up in the morning, getting dressed, having breakfast, brushing your teeth, going to school, and so on. Like all the details of everyday life.
I think we see that stories are this safe space where children can kind of experiment with different emotional states and see what it's like and feel safe, but also understand the consequences of actions in a relatively low stakes way.
I feel like personalization allows children to open up memories, emotions, feelings that they might not really fully understand, but it gives them the opportunity to start talking about that.
In the case of our daughter, for example, she went through a period of being very curious about the carbon monoxide alarm in our bathroom. And then I had, in that classic sort of mum way, just dashed off an explanation while I was doing something else, and she got very concerned about it. And then the next time she used Yarn, she wanted to tell a story about what would happen if a carbon monoxide alarm went off. For a period of time, this was kind of her preoccupation in storytelling.
And how do we balance then giving kids complete freedom to tell their stories or play in their own way versus, applying ready-made narratives or traditional narrative structure to the experience?
Yes, I think there is a value in giving children options for different ways of organizing the story. Some may really benefit from having just a free space to do it however they like. For Storyland, in the alpha test that we did, they were given a 3-part structure, so a beginning, middle, and end. So very open in terms of what kind of story they told, but given a clear kind of narrative shape to it. And I think that the children found that very useful to then organize their thoughts.
Our kind of guiding star is all about empowering children to express themselves and to feed their imaginations, but we at the same time need to make an experience that's really engaging and delightful. So we've designed Yarn to be open-ended, but we recognize that, you know, children as much as adults can be confronted with some paralysis when given a blank page. So, for example, we've designed an experience whereby you can do a drawing and take a photograph of it to start your story, or you can press a magic wand to be given inspiration. But from then on, we very intentionally tried to encourage the child to speak. It's always a balance for us between how much stimulus or how many props we give the child versus how much space do we allow for them to create.
I feel it's really important to be able to both be a creator and a consumer of media. It's two fundamental things that kind of feed into each other. And it's wonderful, of course, to listen to or watch or play other people's stories. And then you also need this space where you can process them and be inspired to create what is meaningful to you. And we actually have a web series that's called POV that is featuring some of the characters from the app. But the app is really like a dollhouse, so nothing happens there until you bring life into the characters. But if you want to get to know the characters a little bit better from the way that we picture them, then this web series actually exists.
Thinking about personalized kids media, as we've been kind of doing in this conversation, what sort of guardrails do we as creators and media makers need to be putting into these products?
Interestingly, in designing Yarn, we would have expected one of the big problems to be safety, making sure that the AI wouldn't generate problematic content. But actually what we found is somewhat the opposite, that there are so many safeguards both built into the models and that then we've then built in, that actually you need jeopardy in narrative to be interesting. If we don't have that, it's kind of saccharine and bland. It's been sort of getting that negativity into the story that's harder rather than removing it.
We also see a lot that kids are challenging rules in play. You play thieves or you steal something in the store. You try to understand like the rules and where are the boundaries. So I think that is really important to have a safe space for doing that. So we have actually had to intentionally build away some rules, you could say. Like it is possible to flush down things down the toilet in the app, for instance. But we have to make that decision like intentionally as designers.
In terms of the stories themselves, at the stage where it's only the child telling the story for their own benefit, I don't think there's necessarily much reason to limit what they say in their stories. Perhaps when it comes to the more collaborative stages where multiple children can work together, then there needs to be some sort of set of ground rules for what are or are not acceptable topics for stories.
Most risks come with multiplayer experience, from my experience. So where you as a kid can be exposed to other players' creations or role-playing themes. So of course, we are mindful about the content that we offer in the app, so it's age appropriate. But if this one kid had the need to act out something that is scary or a bit emotional, I think that's really good, and that can be part of that kid's personal development, and that's super okay in a single player experience, but it's not necessarily something that you need to share with others, perhaps.
The danger in children's content comes when parents don't know what's happening or can't get insight into it. We think it's really important to bring parents in to the conversation at certain points. So we're currently building a kind of personalized parent platform whereby, for example, if your child is telling a lot of stories that feature anger or frustration, you can be served up as a parent with a notification, hey, your child is talking about this a lot, you might want to have some conversations.
For every household, every family member, they have their own restrictions. They have their own kind of guidance of what they would want their children to be exposed to. Sometimes, you know, with the new internet, TikTok, social media, there's so much exposure. to so many things that maybe some families don't want their children to see or learn about or be, exposed to. So having a safe space of what matters to each family, what matters to you as a parent in what your children are learning is really important.
But what about from the other perspective? When you're using these tools, certain AI tools, you can integrate existing licensed IP, perhaps without the permissions of the original creators. How are you thinking about this?
Children love to tell stories around media they already know, and fan fiction is only getting more and more popular with the rise of things like AO3 and other online spaces for storytelling. So sort of self-insert fiction where children can imagine themselves in a world that already exists from media that they know is something that children love to do. It helps them to find a space for their own agency over products that are controlled by corporations. They then have space to say, and this is how I can take over that story, how I can be a part of that world.
I think there is a world where existing IP holders can get value from allowing their characters and IP to exist within these generative AI worlds, as long as there are sort of appropriate guardrails such that they can be assured that their IP is not going to appear in ways that runs contrary to the brand. What you gain is you gain the greater sense of emotional affiliation that kids will then have for your character. And hopefully that will then incline them to buy more books about that character or want to consume media about that character. I mean, there is precedent for this sort of thing. If you look at how music labels responded to TikTok and were initially very averse to this idea that their music would be cut up and shown against user-generated content, but then quickly discovered that actually this was a fantastic vehicle for music discovery.
There has to be that balance of, okay, how are we going to move over into the AI world without it becoming too scary, and with the publishing world still staying strong in story building, making sure the children are connecting and, using their imagination and enjoying the experience. We are in the starting, stages of developing our own platform for this. But AI and the future can only get better, I think.
How do we see the future of this personalization in the kids' media space? How do we see it evolving over the next 5-10 years?
I think it's going to be super exciting in the publishing world. We've already come so far. When I was younger, to have the opportunity to just kind of click a few buttons and have a book with characters that look like me or my family, that never existed. And for that to now happen is amazing.
I think still there's more to do for personalization of avatars so that children can see themselves or reinvent themselves in those spaces. Avatars, I think, are such an opportunity for different types of racial diversity, gender diversity, and so on. I mean, seeing what The Sims is doing, I think is a great example of where avatar design and kind of self-identification in games can go.
I'm really proud to be a part of this team and company that really makes an effort to include all kids by representing like different aids in the app, a wide range of details like hairstyles and hair textures, and trying to not fall into different stereotypes by dividing options into boys and girls styles, for instance. And we actually have this diversity board that has been with us for many years now, that we can ask for help and learn new things from when we are designing new content or new tools. And that is really valuable to us. We use them a lot.
It's really great to hear about how Toca Boca approaches diversity. We feel really passionately about it on Yarn too. We're very conscious of the problems of bias in a lot of Gen AI models and work really, really hard to offset it. And we just feel very passionately that children of all kinds and from all walks of life should see themselves represented in stories.
In terms of how children can take agency over games and storytelling, I think that as the processes potentially for coding or creating games become more user-friendly, they might be able to build games that they like. I mean, of course, Roblox is already a great example of this, where children can build games that interest them. I think would be so exciting to see what kind of games children would make if we give them a platform and the tools to build their own games.
I'm very sure that kids will demand personalization and agency like even more in the future. But with this, I'm also really hoping that any technology, any new technology, will be implemented with this human first and kids first approach, because there is this tendency with new technology that kids are left out in the early development because they require the special attention and they're a vulnerable user group, and they might not have the biggest wallets always. And I think this is really dangerous because they will probably use the products anyway. So it will leave them with an unsafe experience, or it would just exclude them.
What's next for each of you?
Something that we're about to release to the world that we're very excited about is a collective story making feature, which in some ways we think about as reviving some of these very ancient traditions of storytelling across generations. And essentially what you're going to be able to do on Yarn very soon is when you finish a story on Yarn, it extracts a character and then it allows you to create multiple episodes with that character. And what you will be able to do is you'll be able to invite your grandparent, your friend, with the authorization of your parent, to essentially create stories with you in that story world.
We've actually got a conference after this today with the NHS, but working with communities on a much bigger scale to bring personalization. So with the NHS now, we've just created a children's book for children who are talking about kidney transplant, what does that mean? And bringing personalized stories to communities where you think, you know, a children's book isn't really found in these places.
At Tokaboka, we are actually working on a multiplayer game experience, very new for us, that is very, very social, but also safe. It's called Tokaboka Days, and it's a 3D sandbox game. It ties into the Tokaboka world universe a little bit, but it's also a fantastic, totally new experience. It was just released in some markets, and I'm super curious to see how it will be received and how the team will iterate on the design of it.
For me, what's next is a slightly different take around storytelling in virtual reality. I'm looking at documentaries in virtual reality spaces and how they immerse the viewer or experiencer in real world narratives to create emotional impacts. And I think these have such immense power as narratives where we feel we're part of that conversation. We're sitting at the table with people who are talking about their lives that we may otherwise never have the opportunity to hear from. So trying to understand how the documentary form works differently in virtual reality, how the narrative and storytelling affects its viewers in different ways because of that affordance of the tool of virtual reality. So that's my next project.
Well, that just leads us to say thank you all so much for taking the time to chat with us. It has been a really fascinating conversation. We hope you've got as much out of it as we have. And we look forward to hearing more about your kind of companies and products moving forward. Thanks a lot.
Nice to meet
you
you
guys.
So lovely.
Have a lovely rest of the day. All right.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.